Is that alternator working? Are we charging anything?
Yeah.
Okay.
Hey, it's Brock here with Rock Hill Farms, and today we're going to take a look at whether or not these new lithium iron phosphate batteries can replace lead acid batteries for everyday applications, like an old tractor, a four-wheeler, a boat, an old truck, a sawmill, anything you might have around the property that doesn't get run every day. We're also going to talk about the long-term results of using these batteries for our homemade portable power station. And we've done that type of thing before, you know, running power tools off of these with an inverter. But my interest is in the fact that the technology has changed so much and so fast that the battery we have in here that we set up 1 year ago is not nearly as advanced as this battery and cost a lot more. These batteries now don't cost that much more than a standard car battery. Your normal car battery is between $100 and $250. That's kind of the range. And this is a $250 battery. Now, these aren't quite ready for use in your modern vehicle, but for something like my dad's 1949 Chevy, it might work.
With my old trucks, I might start it fairly regular for a while, and then other times it might be 3 or 4 months between. The discharge rate on a normal battery, you go out there and that battery's dead. And if it's set for very long, completely discharged, the cells in it corrode and the battery is destroyed. Even if this battery is more expensive, its longevity makes it cheaper than me putting in 3 or 4 batteries over a 7 or 8 year period.
So there are a lot of reasons why these batteries are better. The number one thing is they don't discharge from just sitting. So the claimed discharge rate on a lead acid battery is 30% over the course of a month. So if you let it sit for a month, it's supposed to have drained itself 30%. These, the numbers you get are 1 to 2% discharge over a month. So for a use case where it sits a lot, that's a huge advantage. There are actually a bunch of reasons why these are better, but there are a couple reasons why they might be not as good, and those include temperature. They're not quite as tolerant of extreme high and extreme low temperature, and they can be a little bit more finicky about their charging sources, so that's something you have to look into before picking one of these batteries.
These batteries that we are going to test are specifically made for a marine application. So they're somewhat sealed. You wouldn't want to drop it in the lake, but a little splash here and there is not going to hurt it. And it's, I think they've actually made it to where it will charge it at that lower rate, where some didn't.
All right, so we're going to put this on my tractor and see how long and how well this will crank my tractor over. But I want to show you some of the big differences. I want to show you first the setup we did 1 year ago with what was kind of a state-of-the-art battery a year ago as far as price and capability, to how much it's evolved to this battery, what I've been using my other battery for, and then we're going to test it on an application that is kind of beyond what I've been doing. Okay, so this is the setup that we built last year. It's got a charge controller here hooked to solar. This is just to a cheap solar panel. Then that power goes to the battery, and then from the battery we're hooked to an inverter. This is a 3,000 watt inverter, and you can see this is a 200 amp hour battery, which is nice that it's got more capacity, but it doesn't have any kind of readout to tell you whether or not it's charged. So with that battery, I know that charge is going to it. I know that I can plug something in and use it. But if I'm using it, I have no idea if it's 20% charged or 80% charged. And you can buy something to tell you that, but it's not built into the battery. Now, if we look at this one, this is going to work like your portable power stations. It shows we have 81% power. As we charge the battery, it'll show how much it's charging and how fast here, how much it's discharging, and how much battery life is left on the other side. So that's a huge upgrade, having that display right on it. And of course it has the battery management system built into it to keep it from overcharging or charging too fast or charging in too low of a temperature.
And it will actually shut the battery off, which if this did happen, you would think, oh, that's so terrible, it's inconvenient. But if the temperature rose to the point where it was dangerous, it would shut itself off first. Just like, you know, we used cordless tools in the shop making pitching mounts for years, and we hammered those drills. We abused them constantly, just running them nonstop. Charge them up and do it again and again and again and again. The durability of the lithium battery is what I find attractive more than anything.
All right, so what I want to do now is connect this battery to our existing system here and to this inverter and run something off of it. And I'll tell you about the usage I've had on this. I've been keeping my DeWalt battery chargers hooked to it so that I can have DeWalt batteries out here and charged all the time. And so it's been doing that, which obviously never runs it down. And occasionally I'll hook up some power tools and things like that to it. For a while I was running these lights off of it, but they started to overload the inverter and fault it out sometimes without running the battery down. These are high bay lights, they draw really high power, and so I've been running the lights off of the shop, but anything else I do out here that uses electricity, I've been running it for the last year off of this battery. This is on, it says 81% charged is how it arrived from the factory. If you look right here on the top, it says 100 watt output. Now it's down, it's showing that it's not using anything yet. Now here we're going to turn this on.
Looks like it's drawing about roughly 400 watts.
Let's see if it starts draining quicker when I plug my lights into it. I've got 10 high bay lights that are 150 watts each running on this. It's supposed to be 1500 watts. It's drawing 1750 watts.
So that explains why it would kick out.
1500 watts is more than your standard space heater or a big table saw. Maybe not more than a big table saw, but your standard like homeowner table saw or a miter saw or small air compressor. These lights are drawing more than most of the tools you're going to use on an everyday. These lights are currently drawing more power than a toaster or a coffee maker or different things like that you would use at a campsite, and it's running them. There are videos out there about these specific batteries that geek out on the numbers, about how many watts and how long this and that, and I don't really care that much. I just want to know, will it work? If my battery goes dead on my sawmill or my old tractor or any of these pieces of simple equipment, and instead of buying a $150 battery, I buy a $250 battery. Is it going to last me 15 years? Is it going to always stay charged? And that's what I want to find out. So we've got 2 of these batteries. Dad's going to put one in his old truck. I'm going to put one in the old tractor. And we'll do long-term reviews if you're watching this in the future and want to ask questions. These batteries also connect to an app on your phone via Bluetooth and show you exactly the condition of your battery. It's currently at 80%. It's putting off 12 volts, 153 amps, 1,822 watts. Another key point that I wanted to mention is you can run these with multiple of the same batteries. They have communication cables that link them, and you can link them in parallel or in series to get either more power or more capacity or duration. Now while we're at it, before we start doing our own test, I want to show you my friend Lucas and his experience using one of these long term.
What's up, Brock? All right, guys, so I've got the trusty old Honda ATV that has been beat to death. but we can't kill it. So we put a Gree-cell lithium iron phosphate battery in this. So I threw it in here 8 months ago because the battery was bad on this one, and it's fantastic. We've not had any issues with it at all. We used it through the winter, and that's one of the drawbacks to those batteries is they say they don't handle the cold very well. But we had no issues through the freezing temperatures or anything. It started up and did just great. So that's my experience with the lithium iron phosphate batteries. I only have 8 months on it, but so far so good.
So we went ahead and put the battery on. Now we're gonna see if it turns the tractor over, see how much power it uses. I have to crank this a lot. So the battery was able to turn the starter over and spin the flywheel, but I couldn't get the tractor to start up like it normally does, and I was having trouble with the starter wanting to spin instead of popping out and then spinning. So we didn't get a great test. The only thing we know is that the battery will turn the starter. Okay, while we're up here in the Quonset hut, we're gonna go ahead and test one of these batteries out on the sawmill. We'll find out how much return charge the sawmill gives. We can do a power check on my power head that raises and lowers it. So I have the power head turned on right now, and it shows 0 usage on here. It's not even registering use, which I was told by the manufacturer that this thing would not run your battery down for days on that little lawnmower battery. Let's see what it does when we raise and lower here.
70, 150, 112.
So it looks like running this power head up and down uses about 100 watts. Next thing I'm gonna do is use the electric start. Now, generally, I would choke this to start it, but I want it to crank long enough for me to see what it's drawing, so I'm gonna crank it without choking it.
Up to 133.
So when I first got the mill, one of the questions I asked was, does this have like a little alternator on it that charges up the battery, or how's that work? And they said it's almost like a trickle charge, but starting the mill was drawing 130 watts. When it runs, it's putting out 130 watts, and it runs a lot more than it starts. So you're never gonna run the battery down, and it was even less power draw for the raise and lower. So the more you run this, the more battery power you're gonna have. This would stay 100% charged just like the other battery does. I never have to jump start the other battery. The difference between them is how long this would crank before the battery runs down and how long the battery should last. That should be like a 2 to 3 year battery on that lawnmower battery. According to specs, this should last you for a decade. All right, this is my dad's famous Frankenstein tractor that everyone likes so much. This is the one we took that old backhoe off of.
I don't know if that's going to do anything or not.
Drew a whole 14 watts. When we lifted the hood to start checking this tractor out, under the breather, right inside the carburetor, there was a giant nest from wasp or mud daubers or something like that. And I had to bust it out and try to remove all the pieces. So that was not doing us any favors with starting this. But once again, in this video, we're not really worried about whether or not the tractor will start. My concern is, how long will this battery crank this engine before it runs the battery down?
Pour some gasoline in. We're still not. Okay.
Have a choke on it.
Again. Again. Almost.
So when we took this battery out of the box, it had 80% charge. And every time we crank this, it's showing that the starter is pulling 2,000 to 2,500 watts, which is a pretty heavy draw. And right now it's still showing 75% battery. You ready?
Yeah, why not? It's still spitting dirt about there.
There was a lot of dirt in there.
Okay.
Okay, so good news, bad news. Bad news is there was a giant mud dauber's nest inside the carburetor. We were trying to pick it out, but there's literally dirt inside the carburetor, and he's gonna have to fix his tractor. The good news is this was pulling, that starter's pulling 2,500 watts, which I didn't even know these batteries would pull that, put that out. And we cranked and cranked and cranked, and then cranked and cranked, and it's not hurting the battery. The batteries went from 80% to 73%. So let's go try it on an old truck.
Okay.
So what do we got here? What are we working on?
Yeah, we're going to try that battery in this 49 Chevy.
This was a 3/4 ton, right?
Yeah.
With a flatbed?
Yes, it's going to be a flatbed. I've got a different bed for it. That's just basically a deck.
He was talking about what kind of cables we could use to connect this battery, because this is a top post and this is a one that the bolts screw into. Said all we need is a coat hanger and 2 potatoes. We can conduct electricity between these wires and that battery. Now hold on, did you just say that these batteries were originally under the seat?
Under the floor.
Under the floor.
I might have said under the seat. I'm going to have to take a bit and...
I didn't know they had batteries back in 49.
Yeah, it would have been a 6-volt.
The hole in this negative battery cable's a little bit too small for the bolt, so we're going to use one of these rotary hole punchers to wobble that out just enough to hook it up. We've been talking about taking this truck over to my place for some bigger projects on it, but it's always more ideas than there is time. Mostly what we've been doing today is just testing and trying, but we're hoping this is a permanent home for this battery, if it works. Is that alternator working? Are we charging anything?
Yeah.
Well, that's all right. If I was this old, I'd fluctuate too.
Looks like it's running about 390, 400 watts.
So for the most part, I'm kind of negative about the whole idea of everything going solar and all the new battery technology. But I don't think we're that far away from these completely replacing lead acid batteries.
Yeah, I agree. There are some drawbacks to them. One being the heat. They need a good insulation blanket around them to fit into a modern vehicle. And I know there are some companies that even make a battery warmer built into it. so that it's better for extremely cold weather starts. But the technology has changed so much in, say, even the last year, that in 5 years they may be in everything. And I've heard that some of the more expensive, extravagant European cars already run them.
And so if you look at the way this is set up with just 2 bolts with a 1/2-inch wrench, it's even easier than a top post battery to take those cables off. If you've got multiple pieces of equipment that you only use each one a few times a year, I can really see the case for having one of these batteries as opposed to trying to maintain lead acid batteries and always having battery chargers all over the place. And I definitely see an application.
Yeah, this would be a lot easier for me to move it over to the tractor, use the tractor for a day, bring it back, drive around with it, because it's lightweight. And we took this one and played around with it a little bit with an inverter and run it down just a little bit. Then we put it on my old tractor, which I couldn't get started, but it cranked it really well, and ran it down some more, and still cranked this one for a while. It had plenty of juice to do what we needed to do. And it's charging.
So I think there's a lot of applications for these types of batteries. If you want to build your own little solar power station that you run electric items off of at your campsite or things like that, that can work. If you want to use it on a trolling motor, might be great. If you want to use it on an old tractor, I probably wouldn't put it in anything vehicle that's new enough to have a computer. But outside of that, I'm pretty impressed with the performance. And so if you are watching this video 6 months from now or a year from now, ask us how they did, because Dad's going to keep his here. I'm going to use mine on some piece of equipment at my house. I haven't decided what, but we'll keep testing these and let you know long term how they work out. I appreciate you taking time to watch the video. We'll put links on the screen to a couple more of our videos, and I'll see you next time.